Welcome back to Advertising is Dead. We're talking to Rishabh. Rishabh, welcome to the show. I'm excited to A, dig into all the pointers from the report, but more than anything else, I'm excited to kind of talk about what you kind of observing on a broader lens. But more than anything else, welcome to the show. I'm excited to have this chat.
Thank you, Varun. Likewise, looking forward to the conversation, and definitely the title of the podcast is as interesting as one could imagine. So yeah, can't wait to get inside it.
Yeah, it's as clickbaity as I could come up with 4 years ago. So it still thankfully stands, is how I like to put it. I want to kind of start off by asking you, just from a broad lens for the audience to kind of understand, how did the entire process of putting this report together kind of come about? How do you guys kind of go about it? One of the best things I liked is literally, I remember reading the report saying we didn't just count like the basics, we just went deeper. So I'd love for you to kind of start with that and then we'll dig deeper into it.
Yeah, great question. For trends as a topic, the way the trends reports are being shaped, and for us, this is a global initiative. Uh, and as you would imagine, when you look at the public conversation today, irrespective of the country and the geography you're based upon, it shows you so many behaviors, it informs so many things, and it has the potential to influence and as well as predict what might happen, right?
Mm.
Now for us, as Twitter, that human archive of emotion, right? When you're sitting on the world's largest focus group, it is integral for us to really consume that piece of knowledge and be able to predict, shape, and create a thought leadership material, something that can really inform marketing opinions, that can inform consumer behaviors, and that can enable majority of the work that we're doing. Now, Twitter Trends is the piece that we actually do as part of the initiative that I just spoke about. How the process really happens is, while predicting trends and understanding consumer behavior isn't something that is happening right now, right? But when you look at billions of tweets across thousand signals, that is a really rich data set to sit upon. Now, what I would really want to emphasize upon is one step further where the Twitter Trends report goes is to not look at just conversations that are so prevalent, right? Sometimes we all, as online enthusiasts, as people taking part in public conversation, you can feel like, okay, this is pop culture happening right in front of me, or that's breaking news that I've seen, or that's a trend I've been a part of, I've been an observer for. It's also about predicting the frequency, predicting how much is swelling, what are the sides of conversation behind each trend, because you get so many signals, and for us to be able to really shape and crystallize and distill that into broad behaviors and themes is something that is really integral and pretty much something that is the focus of the entire initiative. And we do that by adopting volume. We do that by adopting the frequency. We do that by adopting, is this conversation fading, or is that swelling? What areas is it coming from, and all of that. So when we did that across countries and zooming in into India, as you would have seen, the three trends that emerged,
Yeah.
which was all about fan billboards and finance goes social, and last but not least, which is entrepreneurs hitting peak culture. So that's how the report is panned out.
And I love the fact that these are the core three trends, right? Because in many ways there's a certain overlap, I think, at the borderline of it, but it's also kind of like so segmented from what's really happening on Twitter. Like, let's start off with finance going social, right? Which is the first one. Uh, we've all seen this. I would say the last 3 years has been the most I've heard people use the word personal finance and finance in general, and then kind of came in Web3 and like crypto and everything else. And it's not like these things haven't been there. It's just like this explosion of conversation around it and people kind of creating content around it. Uh, are you seeing, and what I also kind of enjoy about looking at this content is people are trying to democratize it, people are trying to explain it, they're trying to teach, they're trying to also kind of talk about trends. So at a broad level, when you sing finance goes social, what are the key pieces that you saw are have brought us to this point, and what did you kind of learn when looking at those pieces?
Yeah, and just a perfect segue to what you just said, democratizing the finance piece of it. Right, finance has been there. The interest in finance, the importance of finance has been there in pretty much all of our lives. The explosion of this content right in the public conversation is something that we are witnessing, and we're
Yeah.
witnessing for the last few years, and even more so now. What peculiar themes emerge from when we say finance goes social is it's no longer a conversation that is restricted to what we call as finance leaders of the
Mm.
country, right?
Yeah.
We've often tend to sort of be consumers of financial advices, right?
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is what we will read. But you've not seen like this entire creator economy, if I were to call it, right? Because that is
Mm.
what we've been witnessing. Like the entire creator economy emerge and start discussing the whole decentralization of finance, right? And finance
Yeah.
to you and finance to me is vastly different, right? You might be looking at finance from an age of where the modern digital currency is headed. Uh,
Mm.
I might be looking at finance from a perspective of what are my options and how do I get inside the whole idea of trades and stocks, right? What are the creators, what are the investors, and who are the people I can relate personally with who are also
Yeah.
starting their journey now. So what we are seeing is one of the most diverse, decentralized conversation of finance that we have seen. That is why we say finance goes social. And it same goes for not just us as just users of the service, even publishers, even brands, right? The way they are actually speaking about finance is vastly different.
Yeah.
Is absolutely different when they were speaking about like download this app or these. This is what you need to do. This is what you need to trade. I think they all embracing the value of what it means for finance to be part of our own lives, what it means to go beyond just saving and investing. It is really about just having that conversation that is mutually relatable, where there's a immense and inherent value exchange, and all those things that we've really seen emerge across.
You know, what's also kind of happened, and I'm just pegging on top of what you just said, is that your finances are very, and I think it still is largely very exclusionary in the sense, if I pronounce that right, because you'd hear terms you didn't understand. You'd suddenly, like, it's literally like the disclaimer you hear for mutual funds. Like, it's that thing which kind of goes by, trying to remember what it is. And what I've actually seen is, and the youngest of consumers really going deep, saying, I want to understand this better. And as I'm understanding it, I'm sharing what I'm learning about it, kind of paying that forward in that sense of the word. Uh,
Right.
and around that as well, would you say that Web3 is now kind of growing as the area of focus in terms of conversation? Or are we still at like literacy being the largest part? And let's say looking at Web3, looking at all the other pieces like blockchain, etc., are still kind of early stage, but we're going to stick to literacy as a conversation for a while to come.
Yeah, I would say financial literacy, digital literacy, digital banking, all of those conversations are here to stay, right? If we just look at the size of the country, right, the runway that we have to cover in the literacy part of the ratio is a lot. So that conversation is not going anywhere. Uh,
Mm,
what is definitely happening, and perhaps at a far more compounded growth rate, is the conversation around what is my journey to finance, right?
yeah,
The journey that is starting as young as when you started tweeting, as young
yeah,
as when you started sort of speaking about your favorite football match or favorite cricket tournament, right? That's what I mean when I say that how diversified it is.
mm,
Finance is not restricted to people that are interested in just finance, right?
yeah,
It is literally permeated across all groups, all generations, and they're taking active interest because it's no longer the terminology or the jargons that you used to fear and say like, hey, that's the piece of mathematics I didn't want to be interested in,
yeah.
as you would say.
So true.
So that is what we're saying. I think everything that is anything that is about to become social or that will continue to sort of swell in the social public conversation needs to have a way to be extremely real, authentic, and
Mm,
sometimes have its own mistakes. Because our financial journey will have mistakes, and you want to
mm,
you want to have that community where you can engage and feel, okay, this feels authentic, right?
mm, yeah,
And I think this is the convergence, if I would say, we are seeing.
mm,
Literacy would
mm,
remain important, but there's this parallel education and parallel interest in finance that is happening largely. Web3 is part of it. Digital
Yeah.
currency is part of it. You look at the growth of conversation in like cryptocurrencies, fan tokens. All of that is one form of finance altogether, right?
And I also love the fact that it mentions how NFTs are playing a part in it, right? Because you're talking about
Yeah.
mainstream culture, entertainment, like literally like Rahman having NFT and the whole Bollycoin piece and all that stuff. Um, if I'm a brand today, and I like the fact that the report actually says, okay, this is the learning, this is what you can do. Because oftentimes what ends up happening with a lot of reports is that you get a report, you run through it like, what do I do about this, right? Which is, I think, generally the question you instead of inferring it. So, if I'm a brand today, what are the core takeaways that you kind of pull out? Say, okay, these are pieces you have to really do to be able to leverage. Let's look at the finance core social part. What would those points be?
Yeah, great question. And let me zoom out a bit on how we actually consume this for us to be able to be in a position to really consult with creative media agencies and marketers, right? Because it's about what can they do with this knowledge and how
Yeah.
can this manifest for a brand. Now, for the team I represent, which is Global Twitter Next, right? Our primary objective is to be the students of Twitter and the students of audience, right? In a way that means like knowing what's happening on the service on the timeline and being very close to the culture that is shaping or breaking as we speak. Uh, Now, Twitter trends is the central source of that truth. Now, when we zoom into finance go social, what does that mean today to the traditional BFSI category, or the category that has also come of age and really embracing digital transformation, right? If I were to pick just an example, for us, it's about how closely we can consume this insight and not just leave it at that. How can we convert that into a marketing opportunity? Because for a brand like State Bank of India, right, which is a brand that has immense legacy, has immense scale and reach, but when it comes to Twitter, their primary focus with us, which goes beyond a campaign in a quarter, which extends for the whole year, is to be present in some of the most popular social moments of the year. So if you just look back at this year, when SBI wanted to connect with International Yoga Day, we were partnering with them on trying to see how SBI can sort of really educate the masses about what yoga is today, right? Not so much about what banking is. And that's the whole idea of social. Or when SBI is speaking about today, the public conversation needs to be kind and inclusive. They spoke about kindness is cool, because sometimes the conversation online for us is all about really leaving our opinion out there and being very singular and not very
Yeah.
inclusive. And here's a brand that is embracing that and actually launching a campaign, right? And there are multiple examples. Amphi, which is all about mutual funds, and invest in that. Amphi continues to understand that the role that Twitter would play for them is about how can they connect with cricket, because for them that is one of their strongest pillars. So when we come and understand that, for us, cricket Twitter community, as much as it's not a surprise to anyone to know, like Twitter is one of the largest stadiums that you could ever find for cricket,
Yeah.
but it is
Yeah.
also a stadium that is growing year on year. We have over 55% of growth in the cricket Twitter community in terms of just sheer volume of conversation. So for Amphi, it's about how they should be present every single tournament, every single time when a cricket conversation happening, for a brand that people embrace as much as for mutual funds, but as much as for the cricket connection that the community has on Twitter. So that's what I would say on how we try and sort of bring and marry the opportunity with the trend.
Yeah, I was one of those people like losing my everything when, especially during the Asia Cup, the second half of it. And I think a lot of us were literally there, like all emotions were out there while cricket was kind of going on.
Yeah,
Which brings me to the second one, right? Because which is honestly my favorite one, because I've been a huge believer in like fan communities for a long time. It's just generally I feel that as human beings, that's what we are. We become communities of people around stuff that we're super interested and passionate about. So
yeah,
let's kind of dig deeper into the fan built worlds part, and especially around subcultures, because when you say subculture, oftentimes people believe it can become a smaller set, but here subcultures are massive. So what have been the key pieces which you kind of learned looking at the data on the fan culture and the whole fan built worlds part?
yeah. And we share this intersection. This is one of my favorite trends. That is a trend I would love to talk about. No bias. But let me start from here. Like, Now, fandom isn't something that is happening today or happened yesterday. I mean,
Hmm.
we've had fandom in this country for decades.
Exactly.
Fan groups, idol worship has been part of our fabric.
Hmm.
What has happened, and that is where we will really sort of break down this whole idea of what's like the mass culture to subculture. What has happened is that the power of fandom has vastly increased, and that has
Hmm.
happened because when you are experiencing fandom that is no longer related to just your local community, when you're
Hmm.
part of communities that are global, that are diverse, that are so related to you, because you might be sitting here and you might be in a fandom community of Marvel fans, right?
Yeah.
Or you might be in a DC fandom, or you could all be about cosplay, or if you were into Bollywood songs, but now just because you've been part of a K-pop community, all you do is actually spend a weekend listening to that K-pop playlist. Now,
Exactly.
this intersection is something that is really meaningful. Is meaningful for us as the population consuming social content from all sides. It's meaningful for
Hmm.
content creators, meaningful for brands that are really out there, not just to stand out, but out there to sort of really embrace this war of attention and be part of that community. Now, when we step inside the fan bill words, what we really saw was for Twitter, the biggest power we've seen is the audience. Like the audience remains and will remain the superpower of the timeline, right? The audience is today so leaned in and receptive, influential, that an idea or a conversation that is empowered by them can
Hmm.
very quickly become into a fan culture that is just mushrooming, right?
Yeah.
It can convert into a fan trend, it can convert into a fan art, and we wouldn't even see it coming. Now that's very special because it's as fandom would have been. Fandoms for us was three things, right? It was Bollywood, it was
Hmm.
cricket, and it was
Yeah.
part of news and politics. And
Correct.
when you today move miles away from that, and like you rightly said, subcultures don't mean they're a subset of something that is bigger. Subculture is so niche and so vast that when you speak about K-pop, India is today, in terms of the conversation that we see on Twitter globally, ranked ninth in terms of the conversation on K-pop. Now that's massive
Hmm. Yeah.
to be in terms of volume. If you look at cosplay, we wouldn't imagine that India will see a cosplay culture come up where not only we will go beyond idol worshipping and co-creation, we will also start really reinventing ourselves and manifesting the characters and situations that we love, right? The fact that we had a cosplay championship 1 or 2 years back in the country is the great testament to that. So what we are seeing is the cultures that identify as global mass cultures, which is
Hmm.
streaming, sports, cricket, movies, all of those mass cultures have other diverse themes, from K-pop to LARPing to cosplay, standing, fan art, all these things, because of how connected the world is, because of how connected we are, right?
Hmm.
Through the
Hmm.
age of social, through the affordability of the data, all of these subcultures today are really prevalent themes in India on Twitter as we see the conversation. And that is what the Twitter Trends report really breaks down, which is the power of these subcultures. Because for a brand, you don't need to necessarily associate yourself with the trends that shouts the loudest, right? It is about, do you see a trend that is closer to the value you have as a brand? And perhaps that is where you would really embrace the conversation, and the community would be right there with you alongside that, right? And there's tremendous and numerous examples of work that we are seeing that the team has been able to sort of build with brands in the whole fan billboards.
Yeah. And if you're watching this on video and suddenly wondered why my camera went all dark, it's because suddenly one of my lights decided to give away. But we, thankfully, the content is rich enough that you hopefully will not notice that part of it. Uh,
Yeah.
it's the fandom one is super interesting for me as well because for many reasons. Right? A, I'm a huge participant. Whenever there is, and I love the fact there's a Marvel one right in the middle, right? So any Marvel DC one kind of popping up. If you're looking at anything which is, for instance, about a movie kind of coming out, you have like literally all fan theories. I'm that person on Twitter running through all of those, trying to dig deeper, trying to find what every single Easter egg means and everything else. But one of the more interesting ones I actually saw was the fact that it's also gone into a zone where a lot of regional content when you're looking at like regional movies, etc. Like I noticed like this huge trend of whenever I would go on to spaces, I would see like a space around let's say the new Tamil movie that's kind of coming out, or if there is something which is kind of coming out. I remember when I think RRR kind of came out, and I was kind of, because I'm Telugu, I went deep into some of those conversations as well. Are you seeing that for fan communities, spaces has become like a hub beyond just the textual content and kind of helping it kind of scale up?
Yeah, and before Spaces, which has really got the fans from all walks together. uh, the key theme here is the Southern Indian audiences. For us, what we are seeing, the audiences in the South India, they form perhaps the most passionate and receptive community on Twitter as of today, right? This community is first to content, is first to tweet about, first to encourage, and first to idol worship, and first to even co-create. Some of the other trends that we see with this community is they're far more visual, they're
Mm,
far more engaged, right? And this is very visible in terms of how much they will tweet or how much they would tweet with images. Like these are the things that you tend to pick up and understand. Like what are the ways that you need to sort of really approach this community that is that leaned in, and if you are interested in having a voice there and having a connection, you might as well do the same thing, right? Because for everyone, as they say, like whenever there is a brand on Twitter, for people they see an individual. They don't see a brand on Twitter. For them, it's an individual right there with that handle, and that's the expectation. So for Southern audiences, our focus has been really to amplify and
mm,
almost recommend and pay a tribute to what we are seeing happen on the timeline. To the point on Tamil. Now, Tamil is one of the most popular languages on Twitter, right? We've seen content consumed in English, we've seen content created in Hindi, and we are seeing content both consumed and created in Tamil as well, right?
mm,
Spaces, which is a way where we are seeing how the audio conversations are moving. Our investment in audio continues with all the recent features that we are adding in. But when it comes to Tamil Spaces, that is where we have seen us really receiving maximum traction. And so much to say that for us, there is a hashtag Tamil Spaces, wherein we
mm,
actually launched its own custom branded emoji, because we see the adoption of Spaces from Tamil community so vastly that it almost qualifies for having its own identity. So whether it's like Ilayya Raja, the famous Tamil composer, going and doing a fan tweets version coming on Spaces, or whether it is Netflix working with Jagame Thandaram and announcing the soundtrack on Spaces. Similarly, Spotify doing with RJ Balaji. Like there are
yeah,
examples that transcend the creator boundary, the publisher to brands, where Spaces has really become the nuanced conversation, which, like you said, a text wouldn't really capture that. Sometimes you need the tone of human voice for you able to
yeah.
really build that connection, and that's the beauty of having every side with the conversation.
And I feel what that's also doing is I feel like someone gives you a way to kind of tap into, and you're not just praying on a broad lens. You're really going into specific subsets. You're going specific audiences, really understanding how consumer behavior is, how I think fan behavior is, right, more than consumer behavior. And especially if you're a brand, or even sometimes to understand the modern consumer, you understand you're at your most emotional self when you are a fan. You are showing your. I don't feel there is very little. Oh, I'm trying to show perception here. There is bare emotion, like literally. I think my tweet when I feel Hardik Pandya did that was literally Pandya with like A's and Y's going into like multiples, right? So that was like me not trying to come up with the tweet to put out. It's me
Right.
literally like emotion just went like that over there. Um, so it could also be a great way to kind of tap into at the base level how people are thinking for brands and platform to kind of understand that as well.
Yeah, and the realness of the conversation, like you said,
Yeah,
like fandom is about being vulnerable, just really putting up yourself out there, your emotions. I mean, you cry together, you
yeah,
you express together, you create the famous memes together that will become headlines in the morning newspaper, right? So
yeah.
the whole this is why fan billboards have come where they are right now, right?
Yeah.
It has become so real and authentic that for a brand it is equally important to be part of that, right? They For them it is very important to understand what role they can play in that community.
Yeah.
And I always say that, right? We've always seen that the brands need to acquire fans, and I
Hmm.
always tend to believe that it is vice versa. Fans acquire you. A
Yeah.
brand doesn't
So true.
acquire a fan, right?
Yeah.
It's the fans will decide whether they want to have a relationship with you or they wouldn't. And that is really important. And to your point, let me illustrate that with just a couple of examples very quickly. If you take Netflix, right,
Hmm.
global streaming company, really investing in the content across the length and breadth of India, very diverse plate, and so are the other streaming players from Amazon to Disney and Sony. Now, if Netflix is doing a fan festival that is called Tudum, that is fan billboard. Because for them, Tudum is such a big part of what Netflix is to all of us. That is that one sound that comes when we play the app. And that has become an annual fan fest. And when that team was working with us last year in actually understanding the whole difference in where the Twitter audience is today overall, generally, versus where the Southern Indian audiences are. And for the
Hmm.
brand to go ahead and partner with us to launch a separate Netflix India South handle just
Hmm.
goes to sort of really inform that how important it is for a brand to embrace the community, be for the community, and build that out, right? So when they actually go forward to release Southern titles and celebrate the celebrities, unlock behind the scenes content, they know like they have an audience waiting there to be loyalists, consumers, and observers, right? Rather than sort of really bucketing it all under one go. So that's a great example of I always feel like how brands is really entering and finding a role that is authentic and real.
You know, I can go deeper into this specific one in many ways, but I know that there's one more takeaway, and I also need to go for a break because I've just been told that we're going on, but we haven't taken a break yet. So we'll take a break and be right back with advertising instead.
Hello, 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 everybody. It's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Cock and Bull, Cyrus Puneet Antriksh and Meghna talk about Queen Elizabeth's passing and the news of a tea bag used by her being sold on eBay for a whopping $12,000. On the Habit Coach, Ashton welcomes gynecologist Dr. Amrinder Bajaj. They talk about menopause in detail and discuss how to navigate the problems that come with it in a healthy and happy way. On Storytellers and Storysellers, Vineet talks to Tanya Bami. She is the series head at Netflix India, and they discuss the rise in popularity of the true crime genre on OTT platforms. On Explain Like I'm 10, Meghnad is joined by author Shivam Shankar Singh and stand-up comedian Nivedita Prakasam. Shivam explains to them why we cast a vote and what is its impact. On the Life Manifesto, Zarina explains how our experiences, failures, and the literature we consume serve as the teachers in our lives. Once again, I would like to remind you all about our merch store. Go and check it out on the website ivmpodcast.com. There's a link for shop. Click on that, it'll take you to our store. Also, do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Please do spread the word about the show. That really does help us. It helps all kinds of podcasts. And do remember to rate us or review us wherever you're listening to us or watching us. That could also be on YouTube. Remember, we have a number of channels on YouTube where you can go and check out our shows. And finally, we would like to thank our sponsors this week, Volvo XC40 Recharge, Heads Up for Tails, HDFC Mutual Fund, and TransUnion Civil. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Welcome back to Advertising is Dead. We're still digging into, I feel that we dug a lot into fandom, but I feel there's one more takeaway, which I think is one of the most interesting ones is entrepreneurs really finding their own voice and becoming a core part of the conversation. I'd love for you to kind of tap into the insight there, and I have a few questions within that to ask you.
Yeah, yeah, and such an interesting trend. Just at this time of the year, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And especially observing the year that has gone by. Now,
yeah,
entrepreneurship, and I wouldn't need to really introduce what entrepreneurship has been for us, right, in the country.
yeah,
The emergence of talent, the emergence of unicorns. Like we've seen the portfolio emerge consistently over quarters. When we look at this conversation, when we say like, what does entrepreneurship means when it starts really intersecting with culture? right? Like everything is a form of culture today, right? As much as entrepreneurship is about really being passionate about a problem you want to solve or a product that you want to build, or probably it's your way to pay it forward, right? Because for you, it might be the whole meaning of life. When we looked at conversation across few years, and as recently as the last year, right, analyzing over billions of tweets, like I mentioned, what we started seeing is that it's become part of culture now. What it means is like it's no longer a conversation that only restricts to, are you an entrepreneur? If yes, this is for you. If it's not, this conversation maybe not for you. But somehow all of us are part of that conversation now. We are speaking about the trends that are being shaped. We are discussing the products that are being built. We are also empowering the entrepreneurs that are coming up and say like, let's build this together. Now if you put in Twitter right in the middle of that, today you see entrepreneurs become brands before their companies have become brands, right?
Yeah.
Because they are the face of the company. They are what you're investing in. So for them, when they are out there as vulnerable and asking, what should be my product roadmap, right? When they're asking this really influential community that connects with pop culture, that connects with entertainment, and also appreciates what it means to be an entrepreneur, they know that they will get the most real, authentic, and as much as if there needs to be a very valid criticism, they know they will get it there. So what we are seeing is entrepreneurship as a conversation is definitely not new to India. The growth, the interest, the emergence and success that we have seen of entrepreneurs, of unicorns that have emerged from India is massive, right? We've all applauded that. When we say entrepreneurship hits peak culture, it's because what we are observing for the last few quarters and the year that has gone by is how entrepreneurship is not a conversation that is only meant exclusive for people that are in the business of creation, right?
Yeah.
It has become a conversation wherein whether you are building something or not, but you are very curious about the whole idea of what it means to solve a problem, the whole idea to actually meet entrepreneurs and meet ideas that are there to solve for a real world problem for you to be able to contribute. And on Twitter, what is unique is what we are seeing is different themes emerge, which is why we speak about culture. So today, entrepreneurs are becoming brands before their companies become brands. The entrepreneurs out there are right now making sure they speak about what they stand for, what are the values that they exhibit, so that their products can be built with as much inclusion and as much importance, right? So the whole idea to building product right there in the public ecosystem, in fact, not just build, but even hire your company over a tweet. Like we've seen so many cases where today founders are meeting their technology leads on Twitter, where they're trying to understand where the investment journey is going, and they're meeting all of that on Twitter. And when it goes beyond, if you look at, you start unpacking and you look at today, when we see year on year conversation and increase in terms of female entrepreneurship, that number today is at 269%. That is the amount of growth that has happened, even in how entrepreneurship needs to be equal. The discussion year on year, like I said, has grown over 22%. Now, we might all put it down to the famous hashtag peak Bengaluru, hashtag Shark Tank India memes. All
I
of
give Shark
these
Tank a
have,
lot of credit for this. I give a lot of credit to Shark Tank for just like kind of putting that conversation out there. Like the base broader audience really kind of got this space a lot more.
Absolutely. And the base audience is exactly why we say it has hit peak culture. Because today, you won't be surprised that, while you were watching a cricket match with the family or that popular award show, today you're actually watching a show on entrepreneurship with the entire family and just taking part in it, understanding like, okay, should a deal be made or should a deal not be made? And that's the interesting part of the conversation, whether that's the fun side of it, whether that's the meaningful side of it, or whether that's really inspiring the next new age entrepreneurs that are really out there on Twitter trying to understand what it means to be in this business of solving, right?
There are a few things I noticed which I thought was super interesting, right? One is the point you brought up about female entrepreneurs really becoming a broader part of the conversation, which is pretty late in the world we live in, but thank God it's a large part of it now. And there were two pieces when I look at the entire chart of what have kind of grown. One is social change, which I found super interesting. A social change is a core part of the conversation, and I didn't realize influencer owned brands was as big as well, because it's still early days for influencer owned brands to be a thing. But these two for me, apart from the conversation around female entrepreneurs, was interesting because when social change conversation is large in the entrepreneur context, it kind of also sets a trend for saying this is what people are talking about more. They're actually looking at more and aspiring towards more. Correct me if I'm wrong in terms of that's what the data kind of said.
Yeah, these are the themes. And if you were to sort of zoom out and say, like, where is this coming from? Because if a topic and a social change is emerging, whether that's on the female entrepreneurship side or the individual influencer own brands, the idea is there has to be a community that is empowering that, right?
Yeah.
So when we looked at conversations, and we spoke about fandom, fan subculture groups, if you look at how diverse the conversation has become, there's conversation around parenting, there's conversation around health and being vegan, there's conversation around working from home. Through the pandemic, and as we all emerge the pandemic, we've seen conversations that have gone beyond the traditional overall themes around sports, entertainment, and news and all of that. And when these topics actually become powerful communities, that really paints the canvas open for creators and really credible creators to come and launch a product that matters to them. Which is why this is a theme we are noticing. This is a theme that we will continue to notice. It isn't a trend that is about to just fade away. It is an industry that is mushrooming, because the relationship is so 1:1, right? Before it becomes a commercial business, it's become a business about I understand you and you understand me, right? And that's the connection we are all craving for. So social change is a theme that is there, and when you are there, that you are sort of creating something of value, doing that for a purpose. What is also happening is when we speak about female entrepreneurship, right? As much as we would speak about where is this today and where it should have been years back, what we can look forward is that it is exactly headed where it should be headed, right? And it can only happen if every stakeholder joins in. So today, all brands are focusing on that. Today, all publishers are focusing on that. And some of the products and services are being built are also built by teams that are equal, right? Because you can launch a product and a service, but what if the team behind the product also doesn't really understand what diversity means, right? So it's about even the process of creation that is really empowering the conversation in terms of equality, social, and purpose. And for Twitter, I think this is where it all comes down to. It all intersects on that movement that is starting, and it might be something we will read about tomorrow, right? In any form of media that we see.
Yeah, and I'm glad about the fact that you spoke about all the pieces around the entrepreneur, right? In terms of just like culture, etc. Because and there's a core insight in the report which I love, is the fact that it's about not being serious about it. Because oftentimes you would assume that if it's about business or entrepreneurship, it has to be serious. But if you want people to gravitate towards you from a culture standpoint, from from like understanding where your business kind of comes from, what your value chain is like, you can't be serious about it as much as, I mean, I'd rather be serious but don't sound serious. Maybe that's the way to kind of put it. It doesn't have to be dull in that sense of the word. And I thought that's a great insight to kind of understand how this kind of matches together, and what's really kind of working for, let's say, a brand or for even an entrepreneur kind of put out there.
Yeah. We said it last year. For the last few years, right? The amount of challenges that the world has faced together, the amount of challenges we've all have gone through in our individual capacity, a bit of distraction and levity goes a long way. When we were meeting and discussing with brands and how they should look at sort of really communication right now, communication that is during the period of pandemic, post pandemic, whether you are a brand that is an emerging brand, whether you are an influencer owned brand, whether you are a unicorn, there is a bit of distraction and levity that everyone really appreciates, right? So you should be serious about delivering on the promise and the products you make, but the journey of doing that and how real and how friendly could that be is always goes away. And we live in an age of where there is trust deficit, and sometimes one way to build trust is to just share a good laugh. So I would say that is something we continue to see. Twitter is where the next meme emerge. We all have our favorite
Yeah.
memes across communities we watch, and that's the language of expression right now.
If I have to ask you across everything, all the trends which are there, which was the trend that was when when everyone kind of sat together saying, "One this is super interesting for us because we didn't realize this would be as big." Which one would that be?
I would say not in terms of a surprise, but
Hmm.
more like that is so good because
Hmm.
let me pick fan bill words as a trend because the all the other trends are as huge
Yeah.
as something that obviously will sort of grow in terms of prominence, but fan bill words was a trend where there was so much to unpack. The
Hmm.
reason why I say that there were so many surprises revealed here is because fandom has not been unique to the country, but what is
Yeah.
unique to the country on the layers and the dimensions of fandom we are seeing. We wouldn't have imagined that cosplay would become such a big conversation that it will feature in a trend.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have thought about LARPing would emerge. Similarly, how we spoke about e-gaming 4 5 years back, we thought
Yeah.
I don't think e-gaming will become as big a conversation for India, but here we are, where e-gaming is not just a conversation; it's an industry with prominent
Yeah.
players and tournaments and brands really
Yeah.
sponsoring and really partnering that. So what I would say is the subcultures that really emerged and really came together to build the fan billboard is really exciting for us as creative teams, for brands that are there understanding where the consumer pattern is, and for all of us as students of culture. It's an incredible time to observe.
No, towards the later part of every episode, I ask my guest set of questions. It has nothing to do about what we spoke about so far. I'm trying to think of a few Twitterish ones to add to this one, but the questions have pretty much been standard so far. Apart from these trends, and I'm going to make this connected to the report, at least in my head somewhere. What are trends that you kind of like tap into a lot more on Twitter?
Wow, that's a curveball right there. But yeah, I since I use the service so much, my my conversation starts and ends from football. If I'm being really honest,
Yeah.
so and I can speak about a trend there, right? As much as football is about cheering for your favorite team, making sure you have the second screen with you so that you can sort of just express what you're feeling as fans. What I've been really interested in now being part of that conversation is to be part of the deadline day, the transfers, the business of football happening right in front of me, right? That is something I've not noticed. So for a Sky Sports to go live 5 hours before on a Twitter Spaces, where you have journalists from all the stadiums coming on to say like, this is the player that is about to be sort of really being bid for. This is the player that today probably Arsenal can actually go and sort of make an inquiry about. So just the real time connection with the business of football, the industry. I think it's a trend that personally I'm biased to because that just changes the meaning of the sport and beyond just cheering for your favorite team.
Yeah, I've actually like I've thought a lot about that because sometimes when questions like this go out, I'm like, what do I spend a lot more time doing as well? And I feel for me, it's apart from the fandom parts, it's actually been um, actually dig into a lot of case studies. I find threads to be really interesting case studies of just how things are going,
Right.
and more than for me, more than the actual case study, it's about like I want to understand how people are writing this so well. So for me, I have like an ulterior motive of understanding how to like. I think I learned to write in a concise form by just following people. That's my like random peeve to do on the
Yeah.
side, more for the form factor than the actual content. Oftentimes, uh,
Yeah, Twitter threads is
yeah,
yeah, absolutely. I think that is just one piece that I continuously keep bookmarking. There's
yeah,
so much to unpack there, and the way the threads keep coming for anything that interests you. Yeah.
yeah. Um, on an off Twitter question, anything you've read, watched, or listened to recently that you'd recommend?
And that I recommend. I was watching Manifest. Not sure if if that is something you've caught on. But I was watching Manifest Netflix, which is a show that just slowly has grown upon me, and I can tell you that the new season is around the corner, so it wouldn't leave you hanging. But that's what I
I'm
would
gonna
say,
check that one out.
as plainly a bit of distraction and levity. Like I said, I wouldn't give you like a really meaningful piece of content to watch. I'm sure there are podcasts that you really swear by beyond
Yeah,
advertising ad. But yeah, if you're in for some streaming, that is something to watch out for.
I'm gonna check that one out for sure. I've been seeing it in the recommendations. I haven't popped onto that one yet. Um, what can you put together in an instant?
What can I put together in an instant? Oh, would be one question that I have to say, like, I still haven't found that out yet. It was something I'll have to think, because yeah, I don't think being instant is my cup of tea. But what I can still say, or let me just probably take a leap of faith here, because I've tried that and it hasn't failed.
Yeah,
I can put a travel plan together in an instant, which could be as quick as 10 minutes,
that's actually that's a
which
great one
is
to have.
sometimes, yeah. So that's what I would say. It's something
So
that
this
I'm
question has
noticing
been
I can
asked
do
to
that.
every single. So this question has been asked to every single guest we've had on the show. That would be the first
Uh-huh.
time someone said travel plan, if I remember correctly. We've had like hundreds of guests,
I'm
and this is
glad.
literally the first time I remember hearing this one. Um, and the last question, which is generally you know a play on the name of the show itself. When you look at these three core trends we've spoken about today, what do you think at the core on the platform is keeping these three alive? What is central to all three together that you believe is making sure that they're kind of like staying at the top of the conversation and kind of like growing the way they are?
Yeah, great question. If I were to reflect upon a common denominator across all these three, right, uh, it would perhaps come down to the authenticity of a conversation. Uh, Now, whether you speak about entrepreneurship, whether you speak about finance become decentralizing, becoming social, fan build words, I think the realness, the authenticity of the conversation is perhaps the common denominator that really shines. And as credit to the podcast, as you said, right? I think we've all seen advertising been a piece of communication that we've all either remembered for the song that was part of it, for the jingle that we loved, or for the joke that was cracked. But
Yeah,
it's not something that you would have always gone back and said over a cup of coffee the next morning, like, did you see this? Let me tell you about this. I think the
yeah,
age and the world that we are living in now is filled with real conversations that for you, like for us to have a conversation right now, there must
yeah,
be certain anecdotes that perhaps would make sense for you to wake up tomorrow,
yeah.
have another conversation with someone and bring a piece of this forward. And I think that amplification, that connection, that compounds is something I think is the common denominator. Otherwise these things would never be trends. They would be things that have faded down.
Thanks so much for doing this, Rishabh. Been fascinating to kind of dig into each of these topics and kind of run through them. And I think there's a lot of takeaways, not just for brands, but for general consumers and people who are on the platform as well to kind of understand in terms of what's really been happening there. So thank you so much for coming on Advertising is Dead.
Thank you for having me, Varun. It's been a pleasure. Really, really interesting chat. Thank you for having me once again.